Ethan never expected a single message to change the entire shape of his evening. It was supposed to be one of those quiet nights where nothing happened, where he could finally breathe after a long week. Heat up leftover pasta and let a familiar movie fill the silence of his Seattle apartment. The weather outside matched his mood. Soft rain tapping against the windows, the city lights blurred behind a foggy sky. It was the kind of night meant for staying in, not for stepping into anything new. But his phone buzzed on the counter. He almost ignored it until he saw the name Claire. And with that, everything shifted. Her message was simple, almost casual. Yet it carried a weight he didn't know how to process. "You should come. It's a small gathering. I think you'll like it." Those words pulled at him in a way nothing else could. Claire was someone he admired far more than he ever managed to admit, someone he quietly looked up to. Someone whose presence had a way of grounding him even on chaotic days. She was older by a few years, confident, warm, the kind of person who spoke softly but left a strong impression. They worked in the same company, crossed paths often, shared conversations that felt too easy, too meaningful. But she had never invited him into her personal world. That alone made the message feel unusual, important, maybe even risky. Ethan read it twice, then a third time. Every sensible part of him said, "Don't go." He wasn't good at social gatherings. He wasn't the type to blend in easily or charm a room. He was the guy who overthought his shirt, his hair, the timing of his laugh. The guy who avoided spaces where he might feel out of place before he could talk himself out of it. Another line appeared from her. "Don't overthink it." It was funny, those words were the exact ones she'd used when she first trained him at work. When he'd been nervous and trying too hard to impress. Now they felt like a gentle hand pushing him forward. He sent a quick, "Unsure on my way," grabbed his jacket, and stepped out into the cold drizzle. The drive across the city felt longer than it actually was. Seattle's wet streets reflected red and green traffic lights as his mind replayed every memory of Claire, her thoughtful questions, the way she listened with genuine attention, her calm tone when everyone else was stressed, the rare, almost secretive smile she gave during quiet moments. Why had she invited him? Why tonight? Why like this? The closer he got, the more nervous he became, but he kept driving when he finally reached her neighborhood. Quiet row of warm suburban homes lined with tall cedar trees. He felt something tighten in his chest. Her house stood out not because it was big or extravagant, but because it looked lived in, warm, full of soft yellow lights that spilled onto the porch. There was a hum of music inside, smooth and mellow, the kind people played to create calm rather than noise. He took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the door. Inside, he was immediately surprised. The gathering wasn't loud or chaotic as he had feared. It was soft, intimate. Just a handful of people talking near the living room, holding mugs instead of drinks, leaning into conversations that sounded honest rather than forced. The entire atmosphere felt carefully shaped, like Claire had chosen every detail for comfort rather than attention. He scanned the room, and then his eyes landed on her. Claire stood near the fireplace, the warm orange glow outlining her hair. She wore a dark green sweater that made her eyes stand out, calm and expressive. She wasn't laughing loudly or trying to dominate the room. She was simply present, listening to someone with that familiar, patient attentiveness that made her impossible to ignore. When she turned slightly and spotted him, her expression changed in a way that hit him instantly. Her smile softened, warmed, brightened. It wasn't the kind you give to everyone. It was personal, direct, almost relieved. She excused herself from the group and walked toward him with a steady, confident stride. Ethan felt every step like a quiet drumbeat. "You came," she said, her voice gentle, like she wasn't sure he actually would. "You invited me," he replied, trying not to sound breathless from nerves. "I did," she said with a small smile, "and I'm glad." Those words were simple, but they carried something underneath them, something he couldn't quite identify. something that made his heart pause for a moment. She reached out and touched his arm lightly. It's a small gesture, but grounding. Her eyes softened even more as she held his gaze. Ethan wished he could bottle that moment, because it felt like she was letting him see a private part of her she didn't show often. Then she leaned in just a little. Not enough to cross any line, but enough that he felt the warmth of her presence. "There's something I want to show you," she said quietly. "Not here, inside." She nodded toward a hallway behind her, a warm glow spilling out from a room deeper inside the house. He opened his mouth to ask what she meant, but she didn't give him the chance. She brushed her fingers down his sleeve knot, a dramatic touch. Just a gentle signal, and began walking. He followed her through the hallway, noticing how the house shifted from soft social spaces to quieter corners. The sound of laughter faded behind them, replaced by a subtle hush. The air felt different here, like this part of the house belonged only to her. She led him into a small, cozy room with books stacked against the wall, soft lighting, and the faint scent of pine. It wasn't a bedroom, not something intimate like that. It was more like a private retreat, a space where she kept things she didn't share with many people. She closed the door gently behind them. The clicking sound echoed in his chest. He wasn't scared, not even uncomfortable, just aware. Aware that this moment mattered in some way he didn't fully understand yet. Claire didn't sit down. She stood there for a second, suddenly looking unsure, like she was about to step into a conversation she'd avoided for a long time. Ethan had never seen her like this. She was usually confident, collected, steady, but right now her hands were clasped loosely in front of her. Her breaths quiet but uneven. It struck him that she wasn't hiding her nervousness. She was letting him see it. And that, more than anything, made the room feel intimate emotionally, not physically. He waited, not saying anything, giving her the space she seemed to need. Finally, she spoke. "Ethan, I didn't bring you here for the party." His heart thudded. Once. She looked up at him with a kind of honesty that left no room for misunderstanding, gentle but trembling. "When I invited everyone else tonight, it was just casual. Something small for the weekend." She paused, searching his face. "But when I invited you, I had a different reason." He held his breath without meaning to. She moved a little closer, not dramatically, but enough that he felt her sincerity. "I've been wanting to talk to you," she said softly, "and I didn't know how." Her voice carried a weight of months and months of quiet looks, small conversations, hidden feelings neither of them dared to acknowledge. She looked down, then back up, her eyes steady but vulnerable. "I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to misread something that matters to me more than it probably should." Ethan felt the room tighten around them, his heartbeat rising. He didn't know what she was going to say, but every part of him knew it would change everything. She took a breath. Gathering courage, "You've been on my mind," she admitted. "More than I ever expected. And tonight, I thought maybe it was time to stop pretending I didn't notice the way things feel between us." The world seemed to tilt just a little. Claire lifted a hand, nearly touching him, but stopped before making contact like she wanted to, but wasn't sure if she should. "I led you in here because I needed to know," she said quietly. "I needed to see what you would do, what you would say, how you would look at me when we were alone." Her voice softened even further. "I didn't know it was that kind of night until you walked in. And suddenly, I couldn't hide everything I've been feeling." Ethan didn't know how to speak. He didn't know how to breathe. All he knew was that the moment was real, delicate, and too important to break with the wrong words. Before he could respond, before either of them could move closer or step back, a knock sounded on the door. Claire startled slightly. Her eyes widened, uncertainty flooding back in. "That might be someone looking for me," she whispered. She reached for the doorknob, paused, and looked over her shoulder at him with a promise written in her expression. "We're not done," she said. "I'll be right back." And with that, she stepped out, leaving Ethan in the quiet room, heart racing. Realizing that the night had just opened a door, he wasn't sure either of them knew how to close. Ethan stayed in the quiet room, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the walls, his heartbeat echoing louder than the distant laughter from the main gathering. Every second felt stretched, suspended, like the world had paused to let him process what had just happened. Claire had let him in here, into this unexpected private space. And her words still lingered in his mind, warm and confusing all at once. She had said things he'd imagined in his dreams. But hearing them aloud, seeing her vulnerability, made it real. Made it dangerous in a way that wasn't threatening. Just impossible to ignore. He thought about stepping out, following her, but something held him back. He wanted to stay there, to let the silence wrap around him for a few more moments. To savor the sensation of being alone with someone who had just opened a door to a deeper connection. And yet curiosity gnawed at him. What was she really thinking? What was she trying to say? Why tonight? His mind raced through every subtle gesture she had made, every careful glance, every brush of her hand on his arm. Then the door creaked open. Claire returned, her expression steadier, but her eyes still carrying that flicker of nervous intensity. She hadn't wasted any time. She had walked back quickly. But something in her body language showed she had been gathering courage for whatever she was about to say next. She closed the door behind her again, and the soft click resonated like a heartbeat in the quiet room. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm but charged with emotion. "I need to tell you something I've been holding back for months." She paused, as if measuring her words. "It's not easy for me to admit, but I realized tonight that keeping it inside doesn't protect me. It doesn't protect us. It only keeps me alone with my thoughts." Ethan nodded, leaning slightly against the wall. His own heart was pounding, a mixture of anticipation and fear. He wasn't sure if he was ready to hear her full truth, but he knew he couldn't step back now. Not when the air between them felt so full of something unspoken. Something neither had dared to explore until this night. Claire took a small step closer. The space between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was intimate in a gentle, emotional way. She looked down briefly, then back up, and her gaze held his. There was a softness there, an honesty that stripped away the usual playful barrier she kept in social situations. "Ethan, I didn't invite you here for the party," she said again, but this time her tone was firmer, more deliberate. "I brought you here because I needed to know how you feel. About us." The words hit him in a way he hadn't expected. "Us," he repeated, voice low, almost unsure if he wanted to hear the answer. "Yes," she said, her voice steady now, the tremor in her hands replaced by determination. "Because I've been feeling this connection, this pull toward you, and I don't know how to explain it or manage it anymore. I've tried to ignore it, to tell myself it's complicated, that maybe it's just a fleeting thought. But it isn't. It's not fleeting." Ethan's mind raced. He had felt the same pull for months, had tried to rationalize it as admiration, as friendship, as something harmless. But hearing her say it out loud, seeing the way her eyes searched his face for a reaction, made him realize it was much deeper. It was more real than anything he had allowed himself to admit. He stepped forward slightly, closing some of the space between them without meaning to. "Claire, I've felt the same way," he admitted, the words tumbling out faster than he expected. "Every time I see you, every time we talk, I feel something I can't ignore. I didn't want to make it awkward. I didn't want to risk losing you." Her lips curved into a small, almost shy smile, a mixture of relief and disbelief. "You mean it?" she whispered. "You really feel the same?" "Yes," he said simply, but the simplicity carried everything he meant. He took another step closer until they were just a breath apart. The warmth of her presence enveloped him, not physically in a suggestive way, but emotionally, profoundly. It was the kind of closeness that made time slow down, that made every thought and every doubt vanish in the shared understanding of two people finally acknowledging their feelings. Claire exhaled softly, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "I've tried to tell myself I shouldn't want this," she admitted. I told myself, you're younger, you're just figuring things out, and I shouldn't complicate your life. But tonight, seeing you walk in, hearing your voice, it's impossible to ignore. And I realized that maybe I don't want to ignore it anymore. Ethan's chest tightened. He understood completely. He had felt that same hesitation, wondering if he should step back, whether he had the right to hope for something more, whether he could navigate a connection that felt so intense and unexpected. But the truth was undeniable. He wanted this too. He wanted her. They stood in silence for a moment, just looking at each other. The kind of silence that spoke louder than any words could. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of emotion, full of possibilities. Both of them had spent too long pretending, holding back, weighing the risks and rewards. And now, at last, the masks were off. Claire finally broke the quiet. "I was afraid," she said softly, almost as if confessing a secret. "Afraid that if I said anything, it would ruin what we have, even the friendship we've built. But staying silent has been harder than anything. And I think I'm ready to take a chance, if you are." Ethan felt a surge of emotion. Every fiber of him wanted to respond, to reassure her, to close the distance completely. "I am," he said simply. "I've been afraid too, afraid of the same things you are. But I don't want to hide it anymore. Not from you. Not from myself." She smiled again, a mixture of relief and happiness that lit up her face. It was the kind of smile that made someone feel seen, understood, and cherished all at once. She took a tentative step closer, and he mirrored her movement. The distance between them shrank to almost nothing, and yet it still felt respectful, gentle. "Emotional? You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear you say that," Claire admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "I kept imagining what it would be like if you felt the same. And now it's real." Ethan reached out and brushed a hand against hers, not in a hurried or aggressive way, but in a gesture full of reassurance and care. She didn't pull away. She let him. The connection between them was electric, not in a physical sense, but in the way two hearts aligned after months of quiet longing. They both laughed softly, a sound that was partly relief, partly disbelief, and partly joy. "I can't believe we finally admitted it," Ethan said, shaking his head lightly. "All this time we could have been." "Here, I know," Claire said, her eyes sparkling. "But maybe it took tonight. Maybe it had to be this night, this moment, for us to finally see it." He nodded. Maybe it did. Maybe it was meant to be. They fell into another silence, this time comfortable, peaceful, full of potential. Ethan felt the weight of weeks, months, and unspoken words lift from his chest. Claire's presence was grounding, comforting, exciting all at once. It was the kind of emotional connection that left a mark, the kind of moment you remember because it changes how you see everything afterward, just as they were about to speak again. A sound came from the door. A soft knock, almost tentative, reminded them that the outside world still existed. Claire's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of tension returning. "Someone's looking for me," she said, her voice careful. But even in her cautious tone, there was warmth directed at him. It's an unspoken promise that this wasn't over. Ethan smiled, a mix of amusement and understanding in his eyes. "Take your time," he said. "We'll pick this up. I'm not going anywhere." Her shoulders relaxed, and she gave him a final meaningful look before moving toward the door. But as she opened it and disappeared into the hallway, Ethan realized that the night had already changed. The moment they had shared, fragile and profound, had set something in motion that neither of them could ignore. There was no turning back now. Their feelings had been spoken, acknowledged, and felt in a way that made everything else the party, the small talk. The outside world fade into insignificance. Left alone. Ethan took a deep breath, letting the emotions settle, feeling a mixture of anticipation, hope, and contentment. The night was far from over, but for the first time, he felt truly seen and understood. Claire's words, her presence, and the courage she had shown to admit her feelings had opened a door not just to a romantic possibility, but to a deeper connection he had never allowed himself to fully imagine before. And as the soft music and quiet laughter from the main gathering filtered into the room, Ethan realized that this night, which had begun as ordinary and unremarkable, had transformed into a turning point, one that would shape his life, his heart, and his understanding of love in ways he hadn't dared to hope for. The story ended this part with a lingering sense of anticipation, a promise of conversations to come, confessions still to be made, and emotions still to be explored. Ethan knew that when Claire returned, nothing would be simple again, but it would be real. And in a world where so much felt uncertain, that was more than enough.